Hello and welcome to episode 16 of the Link Building Show. I'm here today with Molly and we're going to talk about staying creative at work. So Molly, do you see PR as a whole as a solely creative industry?
Good question. Yeah, I would say you have to be extremely creative to be in this role, mainly based on the fact that we are trying to break through what a journalist can already do. So we have to add another layer on something that they could say already fine. So we have to add that element of creativity to make it more enticing.
Your role in particular as a PR manager, do you think that your role is still, although maybe you aren't a PR executive where you'd be constantly writing press releases, do you think that your role is still very much creativity based as a manager even now?
Yeah, so I would say that I still have to do my own pieces, so I'd like to be creative in those. And then also I have to try to keep inspiring the team to make their pieces creative and, checking in on them. So I see a lot more of not only my own work, but everybody else's. So I have to have a different head on for everybody's pieces. So yeah, I would say it'd have to be creative for everyone, really.
Sure, so I was going to ask about inspiration and where you find it, but before that, would you say you find a lot of inspiration from your co-workers as well, their input and other managers, other execs? You think that they all influence your own creativity as well?
Yeah, because I would say to stay creative, that it is important to share with your team, because you don't want this to be an independent role. You want to push what you have out there and then get feedback and just bounce ideas off of each other. So I think it would be hard to do it all by yourself, because you can think, also in your own head, you can think that's really cool or that's a really good idea until somebody comes in and adds a different opinion on it, or they could just add another positive element to it so it boosts your confidence with that idea. So I think, collaborating with the team helps to keep that creativity up.
Sure, but what about the occasions where maybe you are kind of more independent in your work and you do have to sit and in an ideation session, maybe by yourself, to work out something for a client that maybe nobody else is working on? And if you did have that time by yourself, where would you look for inspiration?
Yeah, that's a good point, because I do have some clients myself that other people aren't working on. So I've had some of the same clients for months, so I have to keep thinking of, obviously we do our work on a monthly basis, so I have to keep thinking of new ideas every month. But I think that just comes down to really knowing the niche and the area that your client is in, because I think if I absorb or really get into that area, I can then find stories in so many things, like even just on the news or breaking news stories, and I can then automatically relate that back to the client, which helps me to stay creative. Or knowing if they suit more reactive kind of stories, more evergreen stories. So yeah, it's really understanding them and their needs can help me be creative. But then, like you say, on my own ideation sessions, it is an important thing to get used to, because you can't always rely on other people, so you should have to be able to do it on your own. It's just finding a way that works for you instead of other people, for example, saying, you should ideate this way or this way. That if you're forcing yourself into a position that you're not used to, you're not going to be excited by that. So yeah, finding your own way to do something.
Do you have any tips for situations where you might be in need of ideas and need to ideate, but it's just not happening? Do you try and push through? Do you step away? How do you address a blank, basically?
Yeah, I think, to be fair, that happens more often than people would talk about, I would say, because I think we're constantly looking at our screens and it can be quite hard to constantly absorb the news, for example. So I would encourage people to step away, always do that classic, go for a walk and then have a think about it and then come back to it, or ask somebody for their thoughts on it. And I'm a big advocate for going on Twitter. I have a PR related Twitter where lots of kind people in the industry will talk about previous campaigns they've done that you can find inspiration from, or just looking at campaigns in the area that you're wanting to do, so that you can think, that's really interesting, how have they done that? So you can be influenced by, it's quite nice to see other people's campaigns and their success, so that it spurs you on, so you
Sure.
can look, that's inspiring, I'd like to look into that area, or they can do it, so this is how they've done it, I could try and give that a go, for example.
So when it comes to thinking about ideas for your clients, obviously sometimes these need to be approved, sometimes the ideas won't be as popular as you think. There's many things that can get in the way of the success of an idea, and one of the things is the idea being kind of shot down at those initial stages just because it's not, the data isn't there, because the client doesn't approve. That can be, I guess, quite hard when you spend so much time thinking of an idea that you think is going to be amazing. How do you kind of deal with that in the moment?
Yeah, I think it's about having a bit of tough skin, really.
Sure.
Because you can, be absolutely obsessed with an idea and think it's amazing, and then somebody like your manager could come along and say, that might not work. But I think it's trusting that their experience in their position, they're completely right in that, and that you can then put your energy into another piece. So I think it's just having trust and confidence that what they say is correct, and that, or you could always try and re-angle it so that you have that piece and that may not work, but there's a different angle that you can add to it, or add another data set on top of it. So
Sure.
I wouldn't give up straight away, but yes, if your manager says that it's not going to work, then it's not going to work.
But I guess rather than scrap it, just kind of try and turn it into something else.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you don't want to waste your time completely. So yeah, you could also offer it for a different client. Maybe it's a piece that would work for somebody else's client. So it's about discussing that within the team, or adding a different element to it that might spark a bit more interest.
Do you think it is always the most creative stories that will get the best pickup?
Good question. I don't think it always is, because for example you could say that reactives don't always have to be super creative because they're quite instant. Like you could do those in like half an hour if you find the story in it. So, and those are usually like really quick wins. Like for example, just the increase in searches for something, you haven't had to think long and hard to find the creative story in that. So, but you can push that out, and that doesn't have to be super creative then to win. But I would say that creative campaigns are usually more everlasting. You could keep resending that because of the excitement around it.
So if you had anything for the viewers to take away from this video, what would the main points be?
I would say that one of the main points is to utilise your team members and your colleagues to ensure that you're getting other perspectives on your pieces so that they can add another level of creativity, for example. Secondly, I would say to definitely use Twitter, but a PR version, for inspiration, because there's some amazing people out there that are willing to share. And thirdly, I would say to not be discouraged if your piece, for example, isn't landing at the moment, or perhaps doesn't get approved by any management team, for example, because you could always then try and re-angle it and go back to them with another layer or another data set that you can add to the story. So it's about not scrapping it completely or losing confidence in it straight away.
Well, thanks so much, Molly, for being in this episode, and those were some great insights, and we'll see everybody next time.